I was 29 years old when a man almost ended my life while I was camping alone. Hi, welcome back to Confessions with Jordan, where I take anonymous submitted confessions that are untold and unbelievable. I post weekly, and the stories range from traumatic to scary to dark to embarrassing. If you have any confessions you'd like to share, you can email me at confessionswithjordan@gmail.com. This happened to me about 4 years ago. I had gotten really into backpacking, and I decided to spend a long weekend in the backcountry trail where the campsites were spread out every 10 or 15 miles. It wasn't a campground you drove into. You parked at the trailhead, threw everything on your back, and you would hike. I'm a strong, athletic, tomboy type girl, so being alone did not scare me. My campsite was just over 15 miles from the parking lot for a hike. I actually loved that part. The further I got from civilization, the quieter everything became. By the time I reached my campsite, I'd only passed 2 other hikers all day. Once I set up my tent, I remember thinking, this is exactly why I came out here. I was having a great time. No cars, no roads, no cell service, just me in the forest and camping, which I was familiar with, and I was comfortable. Around dinner time, I was boiling water over my little camp stove, and I caught something out of the corner of my eye. There was a man standing behind a patch of thick brush, maybe 30 yards away. He was just standing there looking at me, stone-faced. Obviously, it startled me. I jumped, I let out a little yell, but immediately I was embarrassed, and I looked away because I assumed that he was another backpacker who didn't want to interrupt me and maybe was trying to get around my campsite to keep hiking. A minute later, I looked back. He hadn't moved an inch. That's when my stomach dropped. This time, when we made eye contact, he slowly stepped out from behind the bushes. He smiled. "Long hike, huh?" I smiled back, "Yeah." "You out here alone?" Of course, I instantly lied. "No, my friend is collecting water." He glanced towards the creek area, then back at me. "I haven't seen anybody." I shrugged. "He'll be back." He stood there another few seconds before finally just walking away into the trees. I remember thinking the whole interaction was strange, but I convinced myself that I was overreacting. Maybe 30 minutes later, I heard footsteps again. He walked straight onto my campsite, no hesitation, like we'd already known each other. He sat down on a log without asking around the fire and started making conversation, asking where I was from, how often I backpacked, whether anyone knew exactly where I was out here, if I brought my phone with me or not. When I told him I had brought my phone, he got insulted and acted as if anyone bringing technology out here in the wilderness made me a bad person. But in reality, he was mad because I think when he planned on doing something to me, there would be tracking, and that was a problem for him. Every answer made me even more uncomfortable. I kept trying to end the conversation. I kept trying to ask him to allow me to continue on with my camping privately, all of which were ignored. Finally, I stood up and I said, "I think I'm pretty tired and I'm going to turn in." Instead of leaving, he stood too, and then he smiled. "You lied." I froze. "What?" "Nobody's coming back." I didn't answer. He took another step towards me. I was watching the campsite for hours before. I immediately reached for the bear spray that was clipped into the backpack strap that was set beside me. "I think you need to leave," as I hold it up. His face changed instantly. The smile disappeared, and he rushed me. I pulled the pepper spray and fired, but my hands were shaking so badly that I jerked it to the side, and most of the spray blew right past him and into the trees, and since he was so close to me, before I could recorrect, he had grabbed my wrist, had knocked the canister out of my hand. I was twisting and tried to run around him. He had picked up a rock beside the fire and struck me across the side of the head. Everything went white for a second, and then I felt myself hit the ground. Before I could even think, he was on top of me, trying to pin my arms while I was fighting as hard as I could. I managed to drive my knee into him hard enough to make him shift his weight away, and then I was able to squeeze out under him, and I ran. Warm blood came over the right side of my eye and down my face. I didn't have a chance to grab my backpack, food, my satellite map, keys, my phone, which was buried in the tent with the rest of my gear. I just ran. I ran so fast I don't even remember choosing a direction. I only remember hearing him yelling behind me and me being terrified and just hearing the heartbeat in my ears like drums. After that, everything was just survival. I spent 3 days completely lost in the woods. Every trail was looking the same, and when I would follow the trail, they would end nowhere, and I would end up without a trail completely. I couldn't remember which direction I had come from, and by the worst of luck, I did not come upon any other hikers or campsites because, again, I had lost most of the trails in my escape. I rationed little water that I could find in the streams and barely slept because every snapping branch made me think that he had found me. I was hungry, I was cold, but mostly I was literally imagining over and over every single scenario that would happen to me when he finds me. On the afternoon of the third day, I caught the faint smell of smoke, campfire smoke. I followed it as best I could. When I reached the edge of a ridge, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had somehow wandered back to my own campsite. My tent was still standing, my backpack still there, peeking out of the opening of my tent, and so was he. He had completely taken over my campsite. He was cooking on my stove, using my chair, going in and out of my tent like it belonged to him. My car keys were probably still inside of the tent, I was sure of it, as well as my phone, wherever that may be. Without them, even if I had managed to hike 15 miles back to the trailhead, I couldn't leave. So I stayed hidden. I watched him from the hillside the entire afternoon, all night, and into the morning. I felt like I barely blinked. Just before sunrise, he stood up, came out of the tent, and walked into the woods carrying a small shovel and a roll of toilet paper. I didn't wait to see where he was going or how far he was going to walk away. I just immediately sprinted down the small hill. I dove into my tent, grabbed my keys, and saw that my phone was on the floor in the tent, and I took that as well, before my brain had time to second-guess anything, and I booked it down the 15-mile trail to my car. I don't remember most of it. Adrenaline carried me for the most part. When I reached the parking lot, my car was exactly how I'd left it, and I drove until I had service enough to call 911. I told them exactly where the campsite was, what the guy looked like, what he had done, and the deputies and forest rangers reached the campsite later that day. He was still there. He hadn't noticed that I had taken the things, hadn't noticed that I had came back, and he didn't try to leave. During the investigation, I learned he wasn't just a drifter. He was a convicted violent offender who had disappeared after violating parole. He had previously served prison time for multiple sexual assaults and secondarily for a violent battery committed during a robbery of a gas station. I can't talk about the court happenings, but I know that he shouldn't be able to hurt anyone again for a long time once I'm through with him. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll see you next week.